October always tells us the truth about some of these teams, and now we have more clarity on the contenders and pretenders after one of the wildest weeks in college football history. Let's take a look at the new AP Top 25 poll. The Georgia Bulldogs stay at number 1 after crushing Vandy. Ohio State at 2 after the bye. Tennessee up to 3, taking down Bama in a classic 52-49 win. Michigan with a statement win against Penn State, followed by Clemson, Alabama, and Ole Miss. TCU up 5 spots with a come-from-behind win against Oklahoma State, the only remaining undefeated team in the Big 12. USC down 5 spots after its first loss of the season to Utah. Undefeated Syracuse at number 14. The Utes shooting up 5 spots to 15. Penn State down to number 16 after the loss. NC State and Mississippi State each sliding all the way down 8 spots, and Tulane entering the poll at number 25. Let's bring in Brad Crawford now to break this all down. Brad, the Neyland Stadium goalposts are somewhere floating in the Tennessee River, and it's feeling like 1998 again after the Vols making some serious noise in the college football playoff picture here. Does Tennessee still have something to prove, or you like them at number 3?
The Vols at number 3 is pretty accurate to me. And if I may, Grace, I'm going to pat myself on the back for calling this upset outright last week. Look, you could see this coming from a mile away based on the way these two programs have played this season in terms of momentum. The Vols came through in a big spot at home at number 3 today. Tennessee's in great shape to move to 8-0 over the next 2 weeks, setting up a possible 1 versus 2 matchup against Georgia on November 5th. And I say 1 versus 2 because the first playoff poll from the selection committee comes out a few days before that game kicks off in Athens. And let's just say the SEC bump will be on full display. So I fully expect, Grace, for number 1 Georgia to play number 2 Tennessee here in a couple of weeks between the hedges.
And the SEC East could very well come down to that game. Actually, it probably will. That'll be on November 5th. Meanwhile, Alabama still in contention for the playoffs. It controls its path in the SEC West. How possible is it that we see 3 SEC teams in the playoff this year?
It's going to be very tough for the Crimson Tide to get that 3rd spot, in my opinion. I don't think the college football playoff race is as cloudy as some suggest in the SEC after Tennessee's win. Let's say Tennessee loses at Georgia a couple weeks from now and finishes 11-1. As long as the Dogs win the SEC championship, that's 2 guaranteed spots in the Final Four for the SEC. Alabama is the team that can muddy this thing up. The Crimson Tide's backs were against the wall last season in a similar spot after losing to Texas A&M early, and Nick Saban's team, ran the table and won out, made the playoff. I don't foresee that happening again, but if it does, that's the SEC chaos scenario that nobody wants to see outside of the South.
Alabama has Mississippi State, LSU, and Ole Miss next on the schedule. Let's talk about Michigan, because they came into this week with a lot of doubters, rightfully so. They've had one of the weakest non-conference schedules, but they're really putting Ohio State on notice now, dominating that Penn State game from start to finish. Do you think the Wolverines are for real?
Yeah, Michigan's statement against Penn State was very impressive and is one of the best wins this season for any title contender. Don't let that 41-17 score fool you, by the way. The Wolverines dominated that game from start to finish. Could have won this thing 59-10 if not for those 2 strange plays in the second quarter. So I'm interested in seeing if there's a team within the Big Ten that can take Michigan, maybe make them pass the ball before that Ohio State game. Everyone's had that game circled for months at the end of the regular season, and Michigan has simply lined up every Saturday and pounded the opposition at the line of scrimmage through 7 weeks. So I want to see Michigan get tested through the air, and also a defense that stops the run, stops Blake Corum, and makes J.J. McCarthy beat them through the air.
All right, I ask this question every week. Who's your overrated team?
Yeah, this week it's not Kentucky. It's North Carolina going from unranked to number 22, which to me is a bit of a surprise. I expected the Tar Heels to be number 24 or number 25 this week. UNC has not beaten a ranked team yet this season, and the one loss, it's increasingly bad. Notre Dame at home by double digits a few weeks ago. So I think a lot of voters were impressed by that win over Appalachian State in September. But that App State team is now 3-3, and everybody's forgotten about the Mountaineers. So UNC is the coastal front runner through 7 weeks, but that is college football's worst division. And even at 6-1, I'm not sure UNC is one of the best 22 teams in college football at this point.
All right, and how about your underrated team?
So I'm not surprised that LSU did not make the poll this week, but I do think the Tigers are deserving of a spot. I think they're an improving football team, one of the 25 best in college football at the midseason point. They have quality wins against Florida State, Florida, 2 bowl teams. And don't be surprised if LSU hands Ole Miss its first loss of the season next week in Baton Rouge. I'm going to call it now, Grace, as my early upset special for next weekend. I believe this team is better than the 5-2 record indicates, especially if Jaden Daniels, LSU's transfer quarterback from Arizona State, is throwing it around with confidence now after having his best game of the season, 355 yards and 3 touchdowns in the Swamp.
Hey, the Rebels have kept it a little bit too close for comfort in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and you're pretty good at calling the upset. So if you put your word on it, I'm just going to say you're giving the Tigers a little extra power here. All right, Brad Crawford, thank you. And for all your college football coverage, stay following us at 247sports.com.